I never imagined my son would ask for $480K to invest, but bought a luxury bike instead. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. The sun hung low, casting a ghostly glow through the thick fog of disbelief that wrapped around me. It felt surreal. My son, my bright-eyed boy who once dreamed of being a doctor, had transformed into a stranger overnight. With trembling hands, I held the message. "Mom, I need $480K. It's a golden investment opportunity." My heart raced. Was this real? The shadows in our home felt darker that evening. I could barely breathe as I replayed his words. A frantic buzz of confusion drowned out the silence. My mind raced through memories, flashes of him riding his bike through the neighborhood, laughter echoing in the air. And now this colossal request? My chest tightened at the thought that I could still hear my husband's soothing voice, a permanent comfort, now replaced by an ominous echo after his untimely passing. He had always said, "Trust him, he's our future." But what future was this? The investment, was it even real? Or had something twisted within him, leading him down a fatal path? I tried reaching out to his friends, but they exchanged glances filled with unspoken worries. Was he involved in something dangerous? Their whispers sank into my heart like cold stones. "You have to help him," they said, "but how?" As if on cue, the front door swung open. There he stood, a sheen of sweat on his forehead, grinning like a child who just bought candy. "Look what I got," he exclaimed, unveiling a glimmering luxury bike, resplendent with vibrant colors, the light catching its sleek frame. My stomach twisted. How could he waste the money like this? "Is this what you spend it on?" I felt my voice crack, but I needed answers. His eyes sparkled with a hint of defiance. "It's an investment in my happiness, Mom." Happiness? The room felt smaller, the air thick with tension. I wanted to scream, to shake him and demand clarity. His laughter echoed like a siren, high-pitched and almost manic. Each peal taunted my fears. What had gone wrong? My mind was a whirlwind of chaos in that moment, surrounded by confusion and desperation. I felt a tightening grip on my heart. Every ache, every tear held a story, and as I stared into his eyes, I wondered, would I lose him the way I lost his father? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The days that followed were like a haunting melody, a dissonant refrain that gnawed at the edges of my sanity. Each morning, I woke up with the ache of unanswered questions wrapped around my chest. My son's laughter still echoed in my ears, but now, it felt more like an ominous warning than a joyful sound. He spun the wheels of that gaudy bike in our driveway, carefree, while I felt trapped in a prison of worry and despair that I spent hours trying to figure out what to do. Should I confront him about the absurdity of what he had done? Or should I keep my distance, pretending that everything was okay while my heart broke a little more each day? Each choice felt insurmountable. I took to scribbling in my journal again, the pages filling with my thoughts, a silent scream trapped within ink and paper. Writing had once brought me solace, but now, it felt inadequate. One evening, after an especially tense dinner where silence loomed heavy, my son left to ride his new bike. I watched him pedal away, a bittersweet mixture of longing and fear clawing at me. I sat on the porch, the cool air nipping at my skin, my mind swirling. Just then, the neighbor's dog, a chocolate lab named Buddy, trotted over. He nuzzled my leg, and for a moment, I found some comfort in his warm presence. I bent down, scratching behind his ears, allowing the normalcy to seep back in. "Hey there, Buddy," I murmured. "What do you think I should do?" As if he understood, Buddy rested his head on my lap, his trust unwavering despite my turmoil. For those fleeting moments, my thoughts faded, and I could breathe, feeling a sliver of hope settle in my chest. I wanted to believe that maybe kindness still lingered in the world, that simple moments could heal darker thoughts, but my brief reprieve was shattered when I received an unexpected text from an unknown number. "I have information about your son. We need to talk." My heart plummeted. The knots in my stomach tightened again. Against all logic and instincts, I found myself compelled to respond, shaking hands tapping furiously over the screen. "Who is this?" I asked, every keystroke a thread in a web I was terrified to unravel. The reply came quickly. "Someone who can help. He's involved in something dangerous." Questions flooded my mind. Images of my son wading deeper into a murky abyss overwhelmed me. I didn't want to think the worst, but each second spent awaiting a response felt like another nail in a coffin of dread. Somehow, my decisions now hinged on a stranger whose identity and intentions were shrouded in darkness. With shaky breaths, I agreed to meet them, my palms clammy with uncertainty. What could this person know? Would it offer a way forward, or just deepen the chasm between me and my son? The uncertainty wrapped around me like the fog, heavier with each passing minute. After the sun dipped below the horizon, I sat at a nearby diner, anxiously tapping my fingers on the table. My heart pounded like war drums. The diner was nearly empty, the flickering neon lights casting a ghostly glow over chipped formica tables. I glanced at the door every time it opened, fear stitching itself into my veins. Then he arrived, a disheveled man with dark eyes that seemed to peer straight into my soul. "Are you her?" he asked, voice low, almost cautious. "I am," I managed, the tremor in my voice betraying my nerves that he slid into the booth across from me. "Your son is in trouble. You need to know the truth." Each word felt like a heavy weight crashing down. "What do you mean?" He leaned closer, the dim light accentuating the worry lines etched deep in his face. "He's been mixing with a bad crowd. The so-called investment was a ruse to cover a gambling debt, and now they're involved." My breath caught in my throat, echoes of dread ricocheting through my mind. "Involved with what?" I whispered, the horror of the situation unfurling in my chest. "Drugs," he said succinctly. "And they won't let him go easily." An icy wave washed over me, a treacherous sea of disbelief crashing against the shores of my heart. I could feel my world tilt off its axis. I had wanted answers, but this was a truth I never anticipated, a reality darker than anything I had imagined. "Is he safe?" I pleaded, desperation tightening my throat. "Can I help him?" The man's gaze faltered, avoiding mine, the silence that fell between us deafening. "I don't know," he said finally, voice barely a whisper. "But you need to act fast." As I left the diner, the weight of his words loomed over me, each step home feeling heavier than the last. A swirl of fear, confusion, and heartbreak consumed me, but in the depths of despair, I felt a flicker of resolve ignite within. I had to reach my son before the shadows consumed him completely. I had to bring him back, even if it meant wading through darkness I wished I'd never have to face. Yet as I pulled into the driveway, my heart sank once more. His bike was propped up against the porch, but the silence of the house terrified me. I called out for him, a plea echoing into the emptiness. But my voice fell flat against the walls that should have felt like home, that he wasn't there. With a growing sense of dread, I felt something shift within me. Had I lost him already? Or was there still a chance, a glimmer of hope shining through the encroaching darkness? As panic threatened to sweep me away, I spotted a crumpled piece of paper on the ground near his bike. Bending to pick it up, dread coiling tightly in my stomach, I recognized my son's handwriting. "Mom, I'm sorry. I need to take care of this." The note was short, but it unleashed a torrent of fear that clouded my vision. What did take care of this mean? My hands shook as I crumpled the paper in my fist, desperation clawing at every fiber of my being. What if this marked the edge of everything I had feared? I turned abruptly, glancing frantically down the street, but all I found was the dim glow of streetlights. The chilling uncertainty wrapped around me like a vice, and I realized that this fight for my son was only beginning. The night felt unnaturally still, as if the world held its breath in anticipation. The streets were emptier than usual, shadows stretching through the remnants of dusk, and I couldn't shake off the suffocating feeling that something was terribly amiss. Gripping the crumpled note tighter, I took one last look down the road before settling back into the car. Desperate for clarity, instincts propelled me forward, and I drove aimlessly, heart racing with each desperate pulse as my thoughts spiraled. I recalled moments from simpler times, first bikes, birthday parties, and the contagious laughter of my son without a worry in the world. How had we arrived at this precipice? With a sudden determination, I pulled out my phone and searched for places around town that might provide clues: the skate park, the local hangouts where I'd hoped he found friends. The muffled sounds of other people's lives filled my ears as I drove, but each honk and laughter felt like a painful reminder that I was drowning in my own isolation. The skate park was bustling with young teens, adrenaline pumping through their bodies as they maneuvered their boards and bikes with ease. I began by scanning the crowd, heart pounding with anxiety. I spotted a few familiar faces from the neighborhood, each one carrying the unmistakable weight of youthful carelessness. But where was my son? "Hey, have you seen Jason?" I asked one of the mothers who stood at the edge, her eyes fixed on her son, lost in a carefree trick. She looked at me, concern knitting her brows. "He was here earlier, but I think he left with a group." "Do you know where they went?" "Not sure. They mentioned the old warehouse by the docks earlier." My stomach dropped. Memories of my own youthful indiscretions echoed in my mind, how the allure of risk often lured innocence into darker corners. I handed her a polite nod and rushed back to my car, the bitterness of fear curdling in my gut at the thought of my son in a place like that. The warehouse was haunting in its desolation, crumbling bricks silhouetted against the pale moonlight. The air felt thick, coiling around me like a warning. I stepped out and approached cautiously, each heartbeat loud in my ears. The metal door stood ajar, a shadow slipping in and out of the tentative light. As I peered inside, voices floated around, mingling with laughter that rang hollow in my ears. Drawing a deep breath, I pushed the door open wider, only to be met with the unmistakable scent of sweat and cheap cologne. It hit me hard, making my stomach churn. I took another cautious step inside. "Mom, you shouldn't be here." A familiar voice cut through the haze, and I turned to see Jason, his wide-eyed expression a mix of surprise and something darker, the vulnerability I feared finding in him. "Where did you go? Why didn't you tell me?" I could barely contain the tremor in my voice, a mix of relief and panicked worry. He began, but the words stumbled, trailing off into the cacophony of noise around us. Friends crowded the space, some seated on worn-out crates, their laughter dancing over a surface of whispered schemes. "Is this about gambling?" I accused, desperate to understand the world he had so easily slipped into. "Is this why you've been acting strange?" His head dropped, shame etching itself into his features. "It's not like that, Mom. I swear." I stepped closer, desperate barrier between him and the shadowy figures behind him. "Then what is it? You're not in some video game, this is real life." Suddenly, one of the older boys piped up, eyes bored, leaning back on the crate. "Chill, he's good. Just making a bit of cash." "Cash? You mean from all this?" My heart raced as I glanced at the scene unfolding before me, the gleam of illegal cards hitting the table, whispers of borrowed debts taunting Jason to the edge of a precipice I couldn't fathom. "You can't be serious. What are you thinking?" "Mom, please," he protested, desperation creeping into his voice. "I thought I could handle it. I was just trying to what?" I interrupted, the anger bubbling under the surface. "Trying to impress. These people? You could get hurt. Do you realize that?" Just then, a hand grabbed Jason's shoulder, and I recoiled as a tall figure loomed behind him. "You don't need to worry, Ma. He's in good hands here." The deep tones reeked of false comfort. "Get your hands off him," I shouted, stepping between him and the stranger. "This is not a safe place." The boy recoiled slightly but then chuckled mockingly. "You don't understand, do you? This is how it works. We've got plans. Big plans." He leaned closer to Jason, who cast his eyes down, fear and defiance pulsing in equal measure. "No. You're spiraling," I cried, half pleading, half furious. Please, Jason, we need to leave now. He hesitated, the glimmer of rebellious thrill battling with a flicker of recognition. But, it's not what you think. His voice softened as he searched my eyes. Then help me understand. My heart ached for him, for the boy whose laughter I missed, desperate to reach beneath the surface of this choice he made. The tension coiled tighter around us, and in a flash, I saw the panic ignite Jason's features as he glanced back toward the boy who had claimed his shoulder. My heart lurched when I detected a shadow moving from the corner of my eye, the door ajar allowing the outside world to press in a little closer. Visible footsteps resonated outside, and an overwhelming sense of urgency flickered within the confines of my core. Mom, we can't, Jason started, but before he could finish, the door swung open with a force that made everything else fall away. I turned to see a figure silhouetted against the doorway, backlit by glaring headlights of a car parked outside. My breath caught. Jason. The figure hollered, voice booming with authority. It was a police officer. From my periphery, I saw Jason's eyes grow wide with horror. My heart sank as the weight of realization crashed over us. He could run, but would he even think to? The warehouse erupted into chaos, voices colliding in panic as I reached for Jason's hand. The fight for him wasn't just against the shadows lurking inside, it was against the storm of consequences that loomed outside of that door. Together, we stood at the brink, and I felt the ground shift beneath us as the night's uncertainty spiraled into uncharted territories. Would we emerge on the other side unscathed, or would the weight of choices push us further apart? The air inside the warehouse surged with tension, voices tangled in urgency and fear. Everything seemed to blur around me as I clutched Jason's hand tightly, sensing that the foundation of our bond was teetering on the edge of catastrophe. The officer's authoritative presence loomed larger than life. I could see his eyes scanning the room, searching for the source of disarray amid the drawn-out chaos. I felt like I was trapped in a waking nightmare. Jason, I whispered urgently, we need to go. Now. But Jason didn't budge. He continued to stare at the officer, his expression a volatile mixture of dread and defiance. Mom, I can't. You don't get it. The officer's footsteps echoed against the gritty concrete, each stride pulling my breath tighter like a noose. My heart pounded as the sickening realization hit me. Jason was entangled in something far more perilous than I had suspected. It's just a game, Mom, he insisted, desperation tinging his words. I wanted to prove myself, to show I'm not just me. A stupid kid. I wanted to grab him and shake him, to drill sense into him, but I held back, knowing that each word I spoke needed to break through the layers he had built around himself. This isn't about proving anything. You need to trust me, I said, trying to inject a calmness I didn't feel. Just then, the officer's voice cut through the tumult again. Hey. I need everyone to line up against the wall. Now. The command jolted the room to life, teenagers scattering in a frenzy, but I was fixed in place, desperation clawing at my insides. The officer's gaze landed on us, a mixture of authority and concern flashing in his eyes. You too. Step aside, he barked, clearly mistaking my paralyzing fear for rebellion. Please, I begged, my voice breaking with emotion, he's my son. He's just lost his way. Complete this in an orderly fashion, he insisted, waving a hand to guide the mingling bodies towards the exit. The pressure in the room grew, thick with tension as laughter and camaraderie crumbled like the warehouse walls. That I tugged at Jason again. This isn't a game. You need to listen to me, please. We can fix this together. His jaw tightened, and for an agonizing moment, I thought I saw him hesitate. The weight of regret seemed to hang heavy around his shoulders, a reminder of the choices he had made not just that night but in the months leading up to this. There was a boy in there somewhere who needed saving, and I refused to let him drown in this sea of bad decisions. Jason, I whispered again, my heart breaking, you have to trust me. You've always trusted me. With a flicker of uncertainty, he glanced back at the other boys who were now huddled together, their bravado lost amid the threat of authority pressing down. They called to him, their voices a tangled melody of reassurance cloaked in recklessness. My son stood at a precipice, and the image of the carefree boy who once rode his bike with abandon felt like a fading photograph. Then, in a moment of reckless bravery, I took a step closer, breaking the invisible barrier that hung between us. Remember the night I taught you how to ride? Do you remember the feeling when you finally balanced? His eyes flicked back to mine, a spark of recognition igniting between us. I was scared, he admitted softly, but you said I could do it. Yes. And you did. You soared. I encouraged, trying to penetrate the mist of fear clouding his judgment. This doesn't define you. You're better than this. We can go home and figure it out. We'll find another way. Suddenly, a commotion erupted as one of the older boys attempted to make a run for it, darting past the officer like a startled rabbit. The chaos deepened, and I saw Jason take a step back, uncertainty tightening his expression. Mom. I can't do this. His voice was a raw plea, despair etched across his face. I felt my heart crack wider open, but I knew this was the moment. You can. You don't have to be afraid. You're not alone in this. Before he could respond, the officer barreled toward where the boy had escaped, and in that brief moment, Jason seized my hands and, with fierce determination, squeezed them tightly. Okay. Okay, let us go. A wave of hope surged through me, pulling us out from the tangled web of poor decisions that had nearly ensnared him. We began to move, stepping away from the last remnants of intoxicating bravado that had lured him in. But before we could reach the exit, another figure emerged from the shadows, blocking our path, one that held an undeniable power over Jason. I wouldn't be so hasty if I were you, came the familiar voice, dripping with cold disdain. It was one of the older boys, a darker undercurrent weaving through his words. Let him go. I shouted, instinctively pulling Jason closer to me, my maternal instincts igniting a fire that drove me to protect him at all costs. But the boy laughed, a hollow sound that echoed ominously in the warehouse. You think you can just walk away? This is just the beginning. He owes us now. Something slippery twisted in my gut at the implications, dread morphing into sickening fear as the walls of my world closed in. My resolve hardened, knowing we were standing on a precarious edge where trust could fracture and darkness could seep in. Jason, listen to me, I urged in a hushed tone, don't let them control you. We can break away from this. But even as I spoke, Jason's eyes flickered, torn between the exhilarating thrill of belonging and the weight of my desperate plea. Mom, they only want what's best for me, he murmured, the darkness beginning to pull him under. The ground shifted once more as the swirling currents around us threatened to dissolve the fragile thread that had just begun to weave us back together. I faced the looming shadows of Jason's choices, and I could see the fateful paths swirling around us, uncertainty washing over every possibility. Then the crushing weight of reality descended, for I knew in that moment that if we didn't find a way out soon, the sun I once knew could slip through my fingers, lost forever in the darkness. The mouth of the warehouse felt monstrous, an unyielding maw poised to swallow us whole. I sensed the discontent buzzing beneath Jason's skin, the temptation of acceptance gnawing at his resolve as he stared at the broader world outside, a world adorned with allure but laced with danger. No, Jason, don't do this. I pleaded, but his wavering gaze drew me closer to desperation. The boys behind us, most clad in black hoodies, took surreptitious glances, already insinuating a sense of belonging that could quickly morph into a labyrinth of dread. The elder boy crossed his arms, a harbinger of chaos. What did you expect? That you could just take your angel's son and ride off into the sunset? He's one of us now, he declared, kicking a piece of debris with disdain. Jason flinched, as if the words were a physical blow. I could see him teetering, caught between the embrace of a gang built on adrenaline and the warmth of a mother's love. I thought I could be someone, Mom, he murmured, his voice thick with the weight of misjudgment. You are someone. I retorted, my heart racing. Can't you see that the people over there don't care about you? This isn't the life you want. But doubt danced in his darkening eyes, and the gang laughter spilled behind us like ink across a parchment, blurring the lines he had always known. Maybe this is the life I need, he said, breaking away from my grip with a sudden fervor, as if the very act of defiance could solidify his place among them. Please, Jason, I tried again, the tremor in my voice echoing the desperation throbbing in my chest. You're worth more than their empty promises. Look where they might lead you, they are not your friends. A flicker of doubt escaped his lips, but then another boy, his hair dyed an electric blue, chimed in, you think you'll be happy with her? Come on, man, you're smarter than this. Just join us. You'll feel alive. Alive? I interjected, refusing to let Jason slip away. Is this what it means to feel alive, to go along with this charade of brotherhood that demands you compromise everything you are? I beckoned, praying for a spark of recognition. Your dreams, your future, they can't be bartered for fleeting thrills. Jason looked torn, caught in the crossfire of loyalty and desperation, and for a moment, he hesitated. I could see a battle brewing within him, one fueled by fear and yearning. Maybe I can find a way to be both, he whispered. No, I said, my voice resolute. You can't try to balance light and darkness, you'll only get burned. I know you. I remember the boy who rode his bike down steep hills with laughter. You can still be that boy. The tension crackled like a live wire, an inflection point hovering in the air. I edged closer to him, willing him to understand how far he had drifted from that vibrant spirit. Remember how you felt when you crossed the finish line in that race? That little trophy you held? You were radiant, full of hope. That is who you are, Jason, a brilliant light. Don't let them snuff it out with their darkness. But then the older boy smirked, taunting Jason with a knowing glance that felt like a chainsaw revving to dismantle everything I had built. Simon, man. Your mom is just scared. You were born for this. Why else would you have agreed to invest that money? Think of the respect. The word invest rang out, chilling me to the bone, and I realized the gravity of that term wielded against him. We had made sacrifices lately, the bills had piled high, but not that high. A sudden panic surged within me. Was this about money? Who had implanted such a seed of greed in his heart? No, Jason, you didn't. Tell me you didn't give them, I gasped, the words heavy with disbelief. They were going to help me. He insisted, a defensive note creeping into his tone. I thought if I made this deal, things would be better for us. But it doesn't work like that. I cried out, rage and anguish swirling together. You cannot barter your future for impressing these people. They don't see you, not like I do. As dread clawed at my insides, I prepared to reach for him. Again, to pull him back from the edge of this terrible choice, but the excitement from the others began to unreel Jason's hope. For a moment, he stood motionless, the allure of acceptance blinding him to the truth coursing through my veins, and then, with a swift move, the older boy stepped closer, tension thickening the air. You still want in, right, Jason? We've got your back. Just give us a nod, and you're one of us. No turning back, though, he added ominously. A knot formed in my throat as I watched Jason waver, closeted in options that could lead him astray forever. I'm here, Jason. I called out, a raw plea necessitated by fear. I'll fight for you. I will always fight for you. But just as the light of decision ignited in his gaze, chiaroscuro shadows enveloped his heart once more. I don't know. He shouted, fists clenched, the tumult of emotions painted vividly across his features. Fear. Excitement. Rage. Despair. And as the elder boy's smile widened into a predatory scowl, understanding mirrored back all around. I realized, with sickening clarity, that the momentary reprieve I had fought for was hanging by a thread. But just as everything seemed ready to unravel, a shrill piercing sound echoed throughout the cavernous space, a blast of a siren blaring from outside, shifting every heart in the warehouse to attention. The raucous laughter was replaced by murmurs of panic, a wild gale of uncertainty washing over those boys like a tide, appending their bravado. Jason's head snapped towards me, his own fear mingling with confusion. The boys shifted like startled deer, eyes darting towards the exits. They're here. The blue-haired boy shouted, and chaos erupted around us. That I in the whirlpool of panic, I met Jason's eyes one last time, sensing a fleeting possibility. Go. Now. Take my hand. Desperation poured into my words, anchoring my plea. But the second stretched thin, all I could do was hold my breath as tension surged, and I awaited my son's decision, realizing that the very fabric of our future could unravel before another moment ended. The sirens wailed like banshees rattling chains around us, and the boys surged toward the doors like a roiling wave, fear scraping at their bravado. In that moment, everything felt suspended, a deep breath before the plunge, and I strained to hold on, grasping at the fraying threads of this chaotic scene. Jason. I called again, pleading with him to break away from the noise, from the influences that whispered in his ear like shadows. I could see the hesitation written in his features even as the pull of the gang threatened to chain him to this life. Don't let them decide for you. This is your time to choose. The gang, which just moments ago embodied his thrilling hopes of acceptance, now seemed like a sinking ship. Anxiety peaked in their faces as panic launched them toward the corners of the warehouse, searching for escape routes. The older boy, however, locked eyes with his hapless crew, spinning fear into an opportunity. Stick together. We can't let them take us. He growled, but the boys looked more like frightened rabbits than a pack ready to confront an enemy. Jason stood still, caught between the chaotic pull of loyalty and my desperate grasp for clarity, and I knew there was a moment hovering just beyond reach, a crossroads where he would either shatter with them or rise with me. Mom, he finally whispered, as the crowd receded. I leaned forward, drawn in by the fragility of his voice. If I leave, if I go with you, what will it mean? Will I ever find my way back? The question hung in the air, charged with a finality that sliced through the chaos. It felt like a gaping maw opening around us, threatening to swallow us both in its uncertainty. It means finding yourself, Jason. It means healing. This is your choice, to be tethered to love or anchored by fear, I urged gently, pressing against the truth of what we both needed, his brow furrowed, wrestling with the heavy history and hard questions that anchored down our every conversation. The sirens outside continued their symphony of dread, yet a softer sound broke through the din, one of uncertainty suddenly mingled with glimmers of hope. The crack of a single glass bottle shattering somewhere distant punctuated the discord, and then, as if someone had flipped a switch, a figure emerged from the shadows of the warehouse, an unfamiliar woman with striking red hair, her face etched with urgency. Everyone out! She cried, waving her arms, motioning toward the exit. We need to get you all to safety. There's a chance they won't come in yet. Everyone hesitated under the weight of surprise, but in an instant, Jason turned towards me, a flicker of recognition igniting a spark in his eyes. He took a tentative step towards the red-haired woman, and in that moment, my heart raced. Mom, but before he could finish, the older boy shot forward, positioning himself between Jason and the woman. Get lost. This is our territory, he spat, a semblance of authority trying to loom above fear. Get out of my way. She ordered, unfazed, addressing him directly. You're pushing your luck. This isn't the world you think it is, and taking him won't save you. The other boys hesitated, their eyes flitting between the chaos of escape and their leader's unyielding stance. Jason's body seemed to melt back toward me, the gravity of my presence pulling him from the brink just as the scent of fear saturated the air surrounding us. Jason, I urged carefully, planting depth in my voice. Choose the light in this darkness. Run with me, let this moment redefine who you are. He glanced at the older boy standing defiantly before him, then back at me. And for a split second, time felt as if it had frozen. That old trophy I had spoken of flashed through my mind, a little boy standing tall, gripping dreams tightly in both hands. But there was another nagging question echoing within me too. Who had he given the money to? Suddenly, that question felt all-encompassing, as if it echoed through the warehouse's skeleton. Jason's gaze turned harder, distant again as he grappled with more than the choice at hand. He was weighed down by uncertainty that had settled thick between us. Fear thrummed through my veins, mingled with an aching sense of urgency. But I could not falter now. Whatever you feel, Jason, whatever you think you've lost, we can find it together. Please, you don't have to be alone in this. A moment of panic washed over him, and I saw the realization dawning, his fight against an unseen enemy finally revealing the shape of his predicament. The sirens continued in the background, invading our sanctuary of chaos. The tension swelled again as Jason's realization echoed in the shifting silence. The sirens outside were warnings of more than just authority. They were a harbinger of the life he had wandered into, a life waiting to seize him wholly if he did not act. And then, as if a switch had flipped, something broke inside him, a flicker turned fierce. He glanced over his shoulder at that gang, now trembling under the burden of their choices, their acceptance quickly fading into the shadows surrounding their faces like clouds. He knew deep down he could pick either path, but that spark I longed for had ignited in his chest. "Mom," he began, but the sound of footsteps echoed louder, each beat drumming the tension pressing against my heart. The sirens roared louder, rising over all else like a storm, and as the woman's voice faded into the clamor, the gang began their retreat. It was a momentary surrender, but within it lay a question neither of us could grasp yet. "Don't follow them, Jason," I yelled, reaching out my fingertips grazing the edges of his shirt as realization jolted through me like a sudden surge of electricity. It wasn't just the gang he needed to escape, it was everything they represented. But as he lifted his gaze to the door, a new light glinted in his eyes, cloaked still in shadows, but with a spark I had almost forgotten existed. And in that haunting moment where destiny hung between us, the warehouse rang with a voice I hadn't anticipated, a voice that sealed our fate with dread. "You made a choice, Jason. You owe us. Don't let that girl fool you." The echo of the words, laden with veiled promises, had cut through the noise, thrusting my son towards the precipice of decision, and I could feel both hope and anguish entwining around my heart like vines. "Choose, Jason." I found my voice, steady in its quivering resolve. As the walls closed in, I squeezed my hand tighter against his sleeve, needing him to understand that in this uncertain storm, we had the power to reclaim whatever hope remained. But just as he took a breath, the ground beneath us seemed to shift, casting shadows as we stood at the darkening edge of our futures, where decisions would soon be made that would tower high above us, embracing both peril and the light of possibility. The chaos of the warehouse felt like a suffocating shroud, and as the echoes of the outside world clawed at my hearing, I could see the storm brewing just within Jason. His body trembled slightly as a whirlpool of uncertainty turned behind his eyes, and I desperately sought to bridge the chasm yawning between us. "Jason," I said, calming the tremor in my voice, even as my heart raced, "remember when you would ride your bike through the neighborhood while I walked behind you? Do you remember how that felt? The wind through your hair, the freedom, and the laughter? That was you choosing the joy of being alive, and you can still choose that." "Mom," he breathed, confusion and desperation battling for supremacy in his voice. "I wanted to do something big. I thought they'd respect me if I invested." I could feel my chest constrict with the weight of his words, the haunting implications of what that money might mean, how easily trust could twist into a snare just as brightly as those ambitions glittered. But respect isn't something earned through false promises or risking everything we've built. It's about knowing you're valued for who you are, not your choices or your money. His gaze sharpened, vulnerability revealing the fractures beneath the bravado he wore like armor. "But what if who I am isn't enough anymore?" he asked, and the question threatened to unravel the very threads that held me together. A sudden wave of clarity washed over me, fueled by a memory of Jason, that younger boy who believed he could touch the stars. "You're my son, and nothing will change that, Jason. You'll always be enough for me." But then time seemed to slip. The sirens wailed intensely outside, a sinister reminder of the looming boundaries of decision, a tether to the world he could still escape. The uncertainty flickered in his eyes again, and I feared that moment, that whisper of temptation, would claim him wholly. "Let us go now," I urged again. "We'll find somewhere safe, I promise. Together, we'll make this right. You're not alone." Just as our connection flickered like a distant star, I saw the shadows drawn across his brow. The leader of the gang had stepped closer again, his features hardened by the gravity of our standoff. "You're making a mistake, kid," he spat, his venomous voice laced with anger. "We're family here. You know that life doesn't come easy without risks. Those guys are nothing compared to what we can do together. Don't throw this away." The weight of Jason's indecision sent a small ripple of urgency coursing through the air. "You're not family," I shouted, stepping slightly in front of him. You're a chain holding him back from understanding who he truly is. You think you're offering him power, but it's no more than a cage cloaked in glitter. The older boy stepped even closer, anger bristling off him in waves. You don't know what we've been through. You don't know what it means to be a part of something. Maybe not. But I do know what it means to lose someone to that something. My voice cracked under the weight of memories that churned in my chest. A father's absence felt sharply like a wound, and pain spilled from my heart into the air like a fierce storm. The gang shifted behind him, an uncertain bond cracking beneath the surface like frozen ice, and I could feel Jason quaking behind me. The burden of choice carried a weight that threatened the very core of his identity. And then came a moment of unexpected clarity. The red-haired woman stepped closer, her voice hardly above a whisper but imbued with a warmth that seemed to wrap around us. You can do this, Jason. You've got the strength to step away from shadows that don't belong to you. You can build bridges instead of walls. A flicker of hope sparked within my son. The uncertainty clouding his expression slowly cleared, his eyes lighting up as he glanced toward the exit, but then, from the corners of the room, a breathless figure emerged, his old friend, Thomas, chest rising and falling unevenly as he approached, panic flooding his features. You have to listen. They're coming. If you stay here much longer. Before he could finish, the two boys from Jason's group turned toward him, their expressions a mix of shock and realization. The tide of camaraderie shifted in that moment, shaking loose their earlier bravado. Jason, you need to decide. Thomas pleaded, darting his gaze from the older boy to Jason. We can't keep this up. I wanted desperately to reach out, to grab onto Jason's arm and pull him toward freedom, but I had to trust him to make this decision himself. The weight of expectations, past choices, and the bindings that threatened to pull him down pressed heavily against him. Mom! He finally shouted, the release breaking from him as someone finally roared for truth amongst the chaos that screamed around us. What if I don't know who I am anymore? What if I pick wrong? A faint tremble in his voice felt like a lit fuse beckoning an immediate explosion, and I rushed toward him, cupping his face in my hands. You won't know until you try. And even if you stumble, we will rise together. Life is built on choices, yes, but it's your turn now to define what that means. Not the gang, not anyone but you. He hesitated, gaze darting to the door as footsteps echoed ever closer, blending with the sirens outside like ominous backing tracks to the unraveling narrative. And then it happened. His resolve flickered like a light struggling to catch fire, a battle of courage igniting in the depths of his soul. I want to be better, he whispered, and the admission felt monumental, reverberating through the shadows of the warehouse, a clarion call for all that was good. The gang leader sneered, lunging forward, but in that electrifying moment, Jason stepped back, and his voice, his decision echoed against the chaos. Enough! He shouted, and the walls felt as if they were closing in with the weight of his growing determination. I'm done. I'm choosing to find myself, not lose myself. Just then, the ground shook and bright lights flooded the warehouse, and I felt myself recoil as the piercing blue and red flooded our surroundings. Jason turned to look at me, his fragile facade trembling but strong, as if daring both the shadows and the gang to besiege our moment, and then, just as I felt the weight of certain victory, a loud crash echoed from the rear of the building, and I turned just in time to see several masked figures busting through the window, chaos unraveling in their wake. Run! Jason screamed, but the world around us fractured into tumult, the decision we yearned for spiraling outward as uncertainty and dread cast long shadows. In that single, shattering moment, I realized the choice had spiraled out of our control, and even as our hopes fractured, the path ahead remained shrouded in darkness, wrapping my son tighter, binding us closer as the storm of consequences bore down upon us. The chaos descended upon us like a fog, thick and impenetrable. Sirens blared outside the warehouse, their urgency mingling with the ringing in my ears as shattered glass crunched beneath my feet. Jason's desperate shout echoed in my mind, a plea mingled with defiance. Run! He cried again, the urgency in his voice igniting a fire within me. In that moment of panic, there was no space for hesitation, no time to become paralyzed by fear. I grabbed Jason's hand, squeezing it tightly as if to transfer every ounce of my strength into him. This way, I urged, pulling him toward the rickety staircase that led to an upper loft, a place I thought might offer us cover from whatever storm was brewing down below. As we scrambled up the steps, my heart raced, a relentless drum echoing in my chest. So much was at stake in those fleeting seconds. I glanced back just in time to see the masked figures swarming like angry hornets, their intentions shrouded in darkness, their chaos swallowing the gang into its maw. The air thrummed with danger, electric and unpredictable. Once we reached the loft, I pushed Jason behind me, my instincts flaring as a mother's protective fire blazed in my heart. "Stay low, stay quiet," I whispered urgently. The dim light filtering through boarded windows cast flickering shadows, making it hard to know whether we'd been seen or not. Jason's breaths were shallow and quick, and I could feel his tremors mirroring my own nerves. "Mom, what is going to happen?" His voice was a scared whisper threatening to unravel the very threads holding us together. "I don't know, but we are not giving up. Trust yourself, Jason. You can do this," I urged, my own voice wavering with the weight of my own fears. I glanced around, desperate for anything that we could use to defend ourselves if it came to that. As I stood there, adrenaline pumping, memories of our countless rides across the neighborhood flashed in my mind with overwhelming clarity. I wanted him to remember that feeling, the freedom of the bike beneath him, the wind hot against our faces, with laughter ringing between us. I wanted to protect that joy against the darkness looming just outside. There was a sudden commotion below us, the muffled voices blending into an indistinguishable chaos punctuated by anger and desperation. I peered cautiously over the edge of the loft, my heart stuttering as I caught sight of Jason's old friend Thomas, cornered and alone, facing the masked figures. There was fear etched on his face, the kind that could steal the breath out of anyone and pin them in place. "Let him go," Jason shouted unexpectedly, the fierceness in his voice making me flinch. "He's just a kid." "Jason, don't," I hissed, adrenaline sharpening my tone as I grabbed his arm. But the warmth of his resolve surged through me like the sun emerging from behind storm clouds. Thomas glanced up, his expression morphing into something despairing yet resolved. "You have to choose, Jason. Now." His words held a desperation that seemed to pierce through the din. The masked figures turned toward my son, and there hung a fragile thread of tension in the air. Would they see the fervor in Jason's eyes and decide to extinguish it? I felt the weight of that moment press heavily upon us. Inwardly reeling, I fought against the spiral of my own fears, digging deep for the reservoir of strength I'd had my whole life. "You can't let fear chain you down, Jason," I urged, willing him to dig deep into his spirit. "You can fight back." And then, quite unexpectedly, it happened. A young boy, no older than 12 with shaggy hair and a look of innocence, slipped past the masked figures, darting toward Thomas. In that heart-pounding moment, he reached out a small hand, clearly terrified but fueled by something desperately brave. "Thomas, come with us," the boy exclaimed, his voice wavering between urgency and fright. For a moment, it was as if the world hung on the precipice of a choice I couldn't entirely fathom. In that brief interaction, something shifted. The masked figures paused, caught off guard by the young boy's audacity. Jason seemed to absorb this like a sponge, his defenses quaking but also alight with newfound strength. "Come on," Jason shouted again, nodding towards Thomas and the boy, as if the very spirit of hope danced in his chest. "We can't leave them." "Are you crazy?" I implored, fear clawing its way up to my throat, but even as I urged caution, Jason felt the warmth of belonging and loyalty swelling inside him. The tide was turning. "It's what I choose," he called back defiantly, impossibly brave in the face of the chaos. He reached out a hand toward Thomas, who looked both grateful and stunned. In a flash, the gang leader shouted an order, the moment shattering as masked figures surged forward, and I was propelled back out of the loft, the world spinning around me, like watching colors bleed in an impressionist painting. And as Jason leapt toward Thomas and the boy, something within me shifted anew. A mix of pride and fear competed for dominance within my heart. The realization that this might be the moment our choices caught up to us tightened my chest. I caught a brief glance in Jason's eyes, a flicker of hope and uncertainty, of defiance and courage towards the shadows spilling from below. Then, the world ruptured into screams around me, and as Jason vanished from my line of sight, the chilling reality set in. The storm I had been bracing for had arrived, and now, the choices we both had to face were unfolding around us. Everything had changed in that fleeting moment of choice. And as the chaos swept over me, I realized that perhaps we hadn't just lost control of this pivotal moment but had inadvertently found a fork in the road that could lead us away from the shadows if only we could navigate the uncertainties ahead. The chaos threatened to engulf us, yet for another heartbeat, an ember of hope flickered in my chest, no matter how faint. I remained frozen at the edge of the loft, grappling with the frantic weight of what had just unfolded. Jason's choice echoed in my mind like a siren, calling out the resilience I prayed he possessed. "Stay down," I whispered urgently, uncertain if Jason could hear me amid the cacophony. I tiptoed along the worn beam, eager to reclaim both the boy and the moment that had just unraveled. But my feet seemed rooted in place, as if the splintering reports of violence from below were too heavy to bear. Then came a shout of visceral, gut-wrenching sound that ricocheted through the warehouse. I leaned over, peering down through the grime-streaked cracks in the wood. The room below had transformed into a battlefield, shrouded in flares of desperation and sharp blades of fear. Jason and Thomas were cornered, but the boy with shaggy hair was proving to be unexpectedly cunning, maneuvering through the chaos like a firefly in the dark. "Go!" Jason screamed, his voice cutting through the venomous air. It surged with an urgency and perhaps a recklessness that sent tremors through me. I wanted to reach out, to pull him back, to protect him from that very thing he so bravely embraced, choice. But as Jason lifted his chin defiantly, the boy at his side grasped his wrist, channeling warmth and strength. It made my heart swell with an unfamiliar pride, a fleeting reminder that sometimes the bravest acts come from the deepest wells of caring. "Don't you dare leave us." Jason's words rang with an intensity that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. It was a plea, driven by a burgeoning instinct to protect those who needed it most. Watching him wrestle with the notion of family and friendship amid this explosive maelstrom struck me deeply. Did I manage to fill him with enough love to encourage such reckless bravery? With a sudden burst, the boy darted toward the entrance, escaping through an adjacent doorway, leading both Jason and Thomas behind him. I swayed, yearning to lose myself in that momentary flicker of hope, a lighthouse amid a dark sea. But I knew the danger wasn't so easily dismissed. The shouts below transformed into bewildered curses as the figures struggled to react. It felt like a siren song coursing through me, an undeniable urge to join them in their escape. But there was another voice inside me, sharp and nagging. What if they're caught? What if a sudden crash echoed through the warehouse, snapping me out of my fog? A hefty beam, weakened by time, splintered above me, and I barely dodged an ominous thud as it collapsed to the ground. My heart jolted as I realized the chaos had found a new form, one that now threatened my only son. "Jason!" I shouted, my voice rising above the din, panic spilling from my lips like water from a shattered dam. I scuttled to the edge of the loft, arms stretched as if I could somehow reel him back from the precipice of danger. "Mom! Help!" he cried, the depth of terror in his voice shattering my resolve. In a lapse of reasoning, I charged forward, navigating the narrow ledge that lined the loft. I had to suppress my fear, reminding myself that the same instinct that guided them needed to guide me, too. My pulse raced as I neared where the scene unfolded below, desperate to extend my hand before shadows closed in, but I halted suddenly as I heard another voice, a chilling command piercing through the clamor. "Don't let them get away." The words echoed ominously, reverberating with a sense of urgency that sent a chill spiraling through my spine. The masked figures surged forward like dark waves, closing in around Jason and Thomas. Fear paralyzed me, but what unfolded next transported me into a different realm altogether. I didn't realize until then how tightly woven anguish and hope could be. The young boy resurfaced, riding in on a seemingly defiant wave, his small stature seizing a moment of courage I hadn't expected. He darted toward the corner of the warehouse, gesturing wildly to a side entrance as he hollered, "This way." His small, brave heart juxtaposed against the looming darkness breathed strange strength into Jason and Thomas. But just as all hope wove itself into a singular tapestry, a harsh hand clamped down on my shoulder. I turned, dread pooling in my stomach as a masked figure loomed over me, their eyes hidden beneath the shaded fabric, glinting with something that felt both cruel and calculating. "Listen," I heard myself speak, though my heart raced like a trapped bird. "Let him go. Whatever you want, I'll do anything." "Anything?" The figure taunted, their voice a low growl. Interesting choice of words. In that moment, Jason caught wind of my captor, his expression shifting from sheer panic to fierce determination. "Mom, no. You can't," but the words fell away into chaos, and with a swift motion, the figure yanked me to my feet. "You'll pay." As I struggled against the confines of their grip, I thought of my earlier plea of hope and the sacrifices I would make for Jason. In that dark moment, something cracked inside me, and I felt a surge of fury that I hadn't known I was capable of. I fought against the hold, and Jason, propelled by desperation, surged forward. Everything seemed to move in slow motion. I could see the young boy, Thomas, and Jason all darting toward me, but their path was fraught with the tumult of desperation and impending danger. Together, Jason shouted, and just as their hands reached mine, I felt my heart crack anew, torn between the fight for my son's future and the dread that engulfed us. Then the figure's grip tightened, and a resurgence of fear washed over me like a tidal wave. "You can't save him," they hissed, and in that tragically defining moment, I realized I'd become an unwitting pawn in a game far more dangerous than any of us could fathom. Before I could utter another word, the world around us shifted once more, the ground beneath my feet giving way to shadows that loomed heavier than ever before. And in that whirlpool of chaos, as Jason's desperate hands slipped away enticingly close yet impossibly far, the echo of choices still loomed over us, a reminder that these moments we lived in were as fragile as the light glow of hope trying to fight through the dark. The chaos that unfolded around us felt like a thunderstorm, each second a heartbeat carved from fear and urgency. I was huddled on the floor of the warehouse, surrounded by shadows and echoes, each scream a reminder that choices rippled beyond just my own. When I thought I'd lost everything, I was reminded again of the fight within me. I had always fought for my son, and now was not the time to yield. And then, in that tumultuous moment, something shifted inside me. The urge to protect Jason spilled over into a desperate call to action, a lifeline that I cast towards him like a net in turbulent waters. "Stay with me, Jason. You are stronger than this." I felt the weight of fear clawing at my throat, an unshakable knot tightening with each decision made by those who had wronged my boy. And suddenly, through the cries of panic, I spotted that flicker, my son, chasing the light beyond the overpowering shadows that sought to suffocate him. The young boy was right, the one with shaggy hair who had bravely reached for Thomas. Together. The echo of Jason's voice reached my ears, a guiding lighthouse in the dark. With a surge of strength I didn't know dwelled inside me, I pulled against the figure gripping my arm, feeling a strange sense of clarity within the chaos. "Let go of him," I shouted, my voice raw yet resolute, cutting through the din. "Do you think fear rules this world? You have no power over love." The masked figure hesitated, confusion flickering like a candlelight in the wind, just long enough for me to wrench free and leap toward Jason, adrenaline propelling me forward. With renewed courage, gathering the remnants of our bond, I met his gaze. The fear in his eyes was finally mingled with something else, determination, a glimmer of belief that maybe, just maybe, there was a way back home. In that instant, Jason seemed to understand what I could not vocalize, that this moment, this choice, extended beyond our crumbling lives. "I'm so scared," he admitted, a soft tremor quaking through his words, but the weight of our shared trust anchored us both. "Be scared," I urged, my voice steady, "but don't let that fear consume you. Just take my hand." And he did. Our fingers entwined, the pulse of history flowing between us, every laugh, every late-night conversation shared under the stars, and every moment of heartache that had led us here. The world spun around us, cascading into chaos, but we fought against it together. As we dashed toward the exit, the young boy and Thomas joined our fray, forging a connection that twisted fates in the least expected ways. We burst into the night, a cacophony of hope erupting amidst uncertainty. My heart raced as we sprinted through the back door of the warehouse, the surrounding air crackling with electricity. The sirens echoed like an overture to our release, but then I realized, as the wide world of possibilities dawned before us, that our journey did not end in escape alone. It redefined who we could still become. Panting heavily, We pushed through the back alleys towards safety, and for the first time in what felt like eons, I could breathe again. Each step away from the warehouse severed the ties to the burdens that had held Jason captive. It was a leap, a choice made not only for ourselves but for each stepping stone yet to come toward healing and redemption. Suddenly, Jason halted, pulling back as both disbelief and longing flickered behind his eyes. "I can't go back to living like nothing happened," he stammered, looking at me earnestly. I knew what he was asking. Could we really find our way from here? Before I answered, I knelt beside him, enveloping him in my embrace. "Neither can I. But we'll face whatever comes next together. Each step forward is an act of courage, a chance to reform our lives." As we stood, clinging to one another, I felt an energy surge between us, a shared resilience igniting the tides of our attempt to navigate this tangled road. We owned our choices now, a constant reminder that it was never just about freedom from the shadows, it was about the journey toward the light. That moment of defiance, as we stood at the crossroads of a world once marred by despair, I made a promise with a whisper. "No matter where this path leads us, you are loved, Jason. You are never alone." With that, we turned to walk toward an uncertain tomorrow, but in unison, we took that step with every ounce of trust, hope, and love intertwined. And just before the night enveloped us in its embrace, I felt Jason squeeze my hand, a silent vow that we would create something extraordinary from the ashes of our choices, a testament forged from our struggles, defying the darkness together in each new dawn. "Let us go," he whispered, determination shining in his eyes. And as we began to move forward, I could finally hear the laughter echoing in my heart again, a melody that spoke of restored faith and the promise that somehow, against all odds, we would find our way home. For in that very moment, we realized that love was worth every risk, and our choices were the keys to unlocking a future no shadow could ever steal away from us, and thus, with hearts entwined, we stepped into the light of a new beginning, no longer a mother and a boy lost, but two souls determined to reclaim the promise of life and the joy that comes from simply being alive together.